94.3 WYBC, the rhythm of the city. This is the Electric Drum. I'm Juan Castillo. And this morning, we're going to be talking about teaching, about teachers, how important they are to our community. Folks keep talking about, how the school systems in this country are not providing the type of education that, our kids need, and that we're falling behind and the whole nine, right? But, we have some great teachers that are doing wonderfully in our cities. And today I want to focus on two of those teachers. One is retired and the other one is now been in the system for 31 years. And I have Ann Langley here. She did teaching for 35 years. And Gary Peluchette. Yeah, did I do it right?
Close. Peluchette.
Peluchette. 31 years as a teacher in Bridgeport. How you doing, guys? How you doing today?
Good. Very well.
Wonderful. Let's start with you, Ann. 35 years.
Yes.
Wow. Tell me about those 35 years a little bit.
I started my career in the suburbs, and I taught in the suburbs for about 4 years, and my husband and I lived in Bridgeport. And when I started having a family, I raised my children in Bridgeport, and I sent them to the Bridgeport Public Schools. And when they went off to school and I thought about going back to my career, I started teaching in my town, which was Bridgeport. And at that time, I taught in a high crime area. Usually the newest teachers got the toughest jobs, and that was one of the toughest schools in the city. And I fell in love. I had a wonderful principal. I had terrific colleagues, and the children were just wonderful, and I never left 35 years later.
Well, tell me about growing up. Of course, that's the foundation for what you ended up doing. Tell me about your life growing up.
I come from Brooklyn, Connecticut.
Okay.
When I was growing up, population 6,000.
Oh, wow.
And I lived an idyllic childhood. It was a safe environment, and I was very lucky to grow up there. When I went away to college, I came to the University of Bridgeport, and that is kind of where I began to build my love for the city. I can remember my father would come to visit me and say, "There are so many cars here. There are so many people." And I'd say, "Yes, isn't it great?" And I thrived in the city, and I became involved with the city, and it just motivated me and fed something about me, and that's how it is.
Right. So while in college, any mentors, who guided you towards teaching? Or is that something that you kind of just felt?
No, I was a born teacher. I was the kid in the basement where I made all the kids, the neighborhood kids come, and of course I was the teacher and made them do the work and corrected the work, and I don't know where that came from. It just always was.
Right. Now I'm going to go over to Gary Peluchette. I got it right this time. 31 years. As a teacher in Bridgeport, 31 years, man. Wow, got a lot of stories, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your early days. Growing up. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Bridgeport.
Really?
And
Great.
I lived in Bridgeport till I was 6, and then I moved to Los Lunas, New Mexico.
Wow.
And that was a big cultural shift for me.
Yes.
And I was there for several years, and then my mom knew I was not happy living in the desert, and she sent me back to Connecticut to go to high school, living with my older sister. And
right.
And so I stayed in Connecticut because.
So, in high school, when you were ready to go to college, were you thinking about teaching?
No, not at all.
Okay, so
I started out as at Southern.
Okay.
I was a theater and English lit major.
Okay.
As a performer.
Great.
And I got out of college, and weren't a lot of jobs for actors. Most of my friends were waiting tables and bartending and working horrible hours. And I picked up a job at the old downtown Cabaret Theater in Bridgeport.
Okay.
Running the box office there, working 90-hour weeks. And I said, I can't do this forever. And one day I came home and I said to my wife, I said, I just signed up to get my master's in education. And she looked at me and said, "You're kidding." And I said, "No, I think I want to do this." And the next year I took a job in a private school because I wasn't certified.
Okay.
So I could teach in a private school. And while I was working on my master's degree, I taught in a private school. And then as soon as I got certified, I made the jump to public schools. And I started out in Bridgeport in 1985.
Fantastic.
Bridgeport Public Schools. And I've been there ever since.
Great. I'm going to ask both of you this question. I'm going to ask you first, and then we're going to go to Ann. Tell me about the first day.
My first day of teaching, I have a very funny story. It was back then you were told, don't smile till December.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
You got to be this stern teacher and smiling and agreeing with me. And I had my class, and they were all lined up to go home, and I was going to be this real stern guy and say, "Okay, we're not going anywhere until everybody is in a straight and quiet line." And I leaned on the closet door, and it was one of those doors that opened in. And the door opened in, and I fell into the closet.
Wow.
And the kids started laughing, and I said, I have to laugh too, because it was pretty funny. And I learned on my first day on the job that you have to have a sense of humor. That's the most important thing as a teacher. You have to be able to laugh. Sometimes at yourself, and laugh with the kids.
Right. And first day.
I was asked to take over a third grade class who had 5 substitute teachers. It was October. And I walked upstairs, and I was scared to death because I thought, what about these kids scared these teachers away? And I walked into that classroom, and it was 2 walls of windows. And the lighting and the ambiance in that room was so wonderful. And it was just an aha moment for me. And I looked at those kids, and I thought, this is going to work. And it did.
That's great. I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm going to have also Gary answer it too. Obviously, the kids that are very intelligent go home, study, do their homework. Parents are on top of them. Parents come to the school for parent-teachers conferences. Those are the kids that, okay, I can get this done, right? Because everything is in place, right? But what about those kids that might not be so intelligent, might have some learning disabilities, possibly? You find that, they're not getting their homework done. They're not studying enough. Parents are not as involved as you would like them to, right? How do you deal with that?
I pretty much follow the philosophy of you build success. And I don't expect the same thing from every child, because sometimes the kids have to find their own success in their baby steps. So whatever they are successful at, I try to connect it to their feelings. This feels good. Let's go to the next step. And so if you lead the children, and if you build in success, and if you treat them honestly, I always called it killing them with kindness. You would get strict with them, and you would make them follow the rule, but then you would just pull up your chair next to them and sit down and say, okay, now let's do this, and let's learn this, and let's be successful. And it works because I really meant it. I really wanted them to be successful, and they know that. And if you don't allow them to make excuses for their failure, they won't fail.
So Gary, it's trust and people buying in, the kids buying in, right? Somehow.
Absolutely.
Talk about how you deal with that.
Very similar. Everybody likes to be praised.
Yes.
Nobody likes to be berated. The child that comes in without their homework, you have to remember, did this kid have to take care of his younger brothers and sisters the night before because mom and dad are working 2 jobs to make ends meet? Is this the kid that, maybe didn't have enough to eat last night? Is this the kid that didn't go to bed because there was no one there to put him to bed at a decent hour so they're alert and ready to go for school?
Yeah.
You have to look at the whole child. You have to see, the kid that's where mom and dad are taking care of things, that's the easy child to educate.
Yeah.
And you have to have a lot of compassion. You have to say,
Right.
okay, well, you got to start getting to bed early. I know you want to stay up late, but you really got to do this because you can't function going to bed at midnight and coming here at 8 in the morning. And
Right.
and
Yeah.
for the child that has to take care of other children, your heart goes out to them.
Yeah, and I noticed that you retired, but now you're involved with a couple of other things.
Yes.
Now, teacher education and mentor, district facilitator,
Yes.
state mandated certification requirements, and also with the transition to teaching, right? Federal grant that brings in certified math teachers to Bridgeport. Wow. Okay, so a lot of conversation today about core. A lot of conversation, especially in the election right now, right? Talking about what's these core values, right? And this approach to teaching, right? Tell me how that is working with the real world, right? What teachers are dealing with today. I mean, you've got the math and the English and the science and all of that, right? And then you got the whole controversy about holding teachers accountable for what their kids, how they test, and how well they do, right? How do you work all that into what you do now?
Besides my love of teaching small children, my second love is mentoring. And I spent my classroom teaching career mentoring student teachers, interns, students who have to come from the colleges and universities and spend a week or so with a certified teacher and shadow them. So that has been a love of mine and something that I have followed through my career and then now as a retired teacher. And all of that discussion about testing and what the curriculum should look like is another layer on teaching that confuses the issue. Because when you are instructing anyone, whether it's a small child or an adult, you are teaching them what they need to know to go to the next step. And somebody in Washington or somebody at the State Department can't possibly know what that is because they're not in the classroom with you in front of that child or that future teacher. And so there has to be an element of trust that when you are certifying teachers in the state of Connecticut, you are saying, I trust you. I trust you to know what to teach the child, and I also trust you to know how to lead the next layer of teachers. And so I don't buy into someone that I don't know and who doesn't know me and has only been to school because they had to be educated themselves and never really taught, telling me what I should be doing in the classroom. And furthermore, Connecticut is different than other states.
Okay.
So when you take the same brush and paint it across this country, that doesn't work so well either. And when you start testing in that way, you're not really testing what the children have learned. You're testing what these preconceived ideas are that these adults have. And so that's
Right.
kind of my philosophy on that.
Yeah. And Gary, to that end, discussing it, going into it a little bit further, right? I mean, I found that my own educational experience here in this country, high school, grammar school, high school was about being a parrot. This is what you do know. I'm going to test you on this, and you got to answer this. You got to answer it like this, right? When I got to college, now I'm writing papers, and now this professor is asking me, what do I think? He's asking me to become a critical thinker. All right, I haven't been doing that. I've been testing real well because I've been a parrot, and I'm able to memorize well. Some of my friends who were just as smart as I was, were not doing well because they weren't good at memorizing the information, right? But they were great critical thinkers, though, right? Because that's kind of how they learn, right? And it was easy for them to understand stuff if you put it in different concept, and if you push them to somehow look at both sides, look at it in a different way, right? Tell me, how do you deal with that in terms of preparing kids for the next level?
Well, there was a time when we were teaching critical thinking skills. We were, the higher order thinking skills. And then with No Child Left Behind, we went away from it.
Yes.
We went to the high stakes test, that everything depended on taking one test, and this is what you were as a learner, and then later as a teacher, because they were trying to link the students' test scores from one test to how well a teacher can teach. And that doesn't work on a number of levels. You could have, like a high school teacher could be teaching, an English 1 class, and those kids could be really struggling. And if they're not testing well, then that teacher's failing. But 2 periods later, their honors English class is soaring through Shakespeare, and they're a successful teacher. No, it's the same teacher. They're just trying to reach different students in different ways. We have to look at multiple indicators of student success. We can't just look at one test. Maybe this kid can't do a standardized test, but this child can write really well. We look at the writing, look how the child can communicate. Because at the end of the day, when we get into the real world, it is about how we communicate, whether it's our own thoughts or thoughts between 2 people that we happen to work for. It's about communication, and it's about thinking, and it's about problem solving. And of course, and most importantly, working together. We don't stand in a line in a factory like we did in the 40s and 50s building widgets all day. We work together as problem solvers, and that's what we need to teach.
I'm Juan Castillo. This is the Electric Drum, and we're talking about teaching in America. I have Ann Langley here. She worked for 35 years in the Bridgeport public school system. I have Gary Peluchette, who is working there for the last 31 years and still working there. And we're talking about, this profession that, who's more important, our future is about the education that our kids get, and somehow, I don't know if here in America we put the high value on teachers, and that's been a conversation that we've been having for a long time. I wish that we could end it by, putting a high value on our teachers. Ann, let me. I want to ask you this. What do you, in terms of, because we talked about everything else, right? Character building, right? Very important, right? Tell me how you approach that with your kids.
Well, some kids they are characters. And they come with the ability to manipulate the system and to find their way around. Other children don't have that bravado or don't have that self-confidence, and therefore you have to help them shore them up a little bit more. One of the things is when I started teaching 6th grade, I had a little cart on wheels, and I had bought colored pencils and markers and scissors and all kinds of enticing art materials and supplies for the kids. And when I was getting my class ready in the summertime, one of the teachers came in and said, "Oh, you've got to lock that up because those kids, they'll steal every single thing. The first day it'll all be gone." And I thought, really? And when the kids came in that day and I was introducing the different parts of the room that they would be free to use, I showed them the cart and I told them that I was warned that they would take the things without my permission. And I said to them, if you feel like you need to have a crayon or a pencil or anything that's on this cart, ask me first. Because the answer just might be, yes, take it. And yet the answer may also be no. And if the answer is no, then we can talk about why the answer would be no. And I've always had that philosophy in my classroom about talking to them about what it is when they want to go over to the dark side, so to speak, when they don't want to do their homework, when they get angry, and I would say to them, "Are you mad at me?" And no, I'm not mad at you. And we would talk about what is making them angry. So I think that putting children in touch with an awareness about their feelings and how they feel when they do good things, it works. And I saw it work hundreds and thousands of times throughout my career. And that's always been my philosophy, that if you just help them to understand what they're feeling and how to get those feelings to change enough so that they don't feel negative anymore, but they feel positive, they build their own character. It's not anything I do. I don't have a magic wand. They hold the magic wand.
Wow, that's fantastic. Gary, and I'm going to ask you the same question, and actually it's a two-part question, so I'm going to give both of you guys a chance to think about. The first question, which you don't have to, neither one of you have to answer right now, is who's that student that, you know, somewhere along the line you realize, hey, this is why I do this, right? The other question, which I'm going to start with Gary, is this whole thing about, you know, teachers not wanting to teach at public schools in the inner city. You did private. You taught at a private school, and then you ended up at Bridgeport. Right. Talk about that, and think about that question, and then I'm going to come back to you with the original question I asked. Talk about the inner city and teaching in the inner city, and why is it that people have that kind of attitude?
Well, my private school experience was in the inner city too.
Oh, it was
in
okay.
Bridgeport also.
Oh, okay.
But it was a private school in Bridgeport.
Right.
And I'll be quite honest. One of the main reasons for going to a public school is I am a strong proponent of the teachers union. Okay. I was the local president in Bridgeport. I sit on the board of directors for the National Education Association, our national union, and in a private school, you don't have the support and the protection to be a good teacher. If you annoy a principal, you can be shown the door in a private school. Whereas in a public school, you know, as long as you are good at your craft and you follow policy and procedure, you can be successful and no one's going to come after you or bother you. I've seen, you know, you can't be persecuted in a public school system.
Union is very important in a democracy.
Absolutely.
Extremely
My father
important.
was a union organizer, so
was I.
So
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
It's inherent.
So okay, so continue to talk about, you know, working at a public school, and to some degree, some teachers feel like it's difficult, right? You know, and that's why I don't want to.
It is difficult.
Right.
I'm not going to lie and say, oh, it's
Right.
easy. You can just walk in
Right.
and smile and everything. No, there are days that you go home and you say, why am I doing this?
Really? Okay.
Everybody has
Be
that.
honest.
Because it can be difficult. The kid you're working with, you think is coming along really well, and then, you know, the kid has a meltdown or something upsets that child, and, you know, they do something to get them in trouble, maybe on a small scale, maybe even bigger. They get arrested, and then they're out of your classroom, and you don't have any influence over that kid anymore. And you wonder what they were thinking when they did it, and you feel like your efforts, you know, I teach middle school, so my efforts were in vain on this kid. But, you know.
But in 31 years, you're still there, so I'm quite sure there's a lot of other kids that.
And then you have the ones, you know, the kids this kid is just
overcome the odds.
This kid, you know, you're worried about them, and somehow they have it within them to turn themselves around.
On that note, I'm gonna end with that one kid that overcame the odds, that sort of made you feel like, okay, you know, despite everything else, this is why I do this. Without, of course, you know, confidentiality.
I can't limit it to one child.
There you
I
go.
just can't.
Okay.
And just to back a little bit of what Gary said,
Yes.
life is for living. And I've always been a risk taker, and it has always served me well. Because as a public school teacher in an urban environment, you are living life and you are experiencing life. And there's no protecting you from anything other than real life. And it's so real, it's so honest. And those kids come to you with that honesty. They're not out to impress you. They are out to be who they are, and I embrace that. And so all of the children, whether or not they thought they influenced me or not, they did. And whether or not I thought they influenced me or not, they did. Yeah. So each one of them was a drop in my bucket, and my bucket is filled.
Overflowing, huh? Mm-hmm. Gary?
There have been a lot. You know, I've had kids that have gone to Harvard, to Princeton, to Yale. I've had other kids that have opened their own businesses, that have done things that put them on a different track in life, that, you know, they didn't want to go to college. But, you know, one of them opened his own gymnastics studio because that's what he wanted to do. But just the other day, a former student put in an application to be a teaching intern in our district, and it said, what teacher has influenced you? And my name was there.
There you go. And someone comes to you, they're thinking about going into teaching, right? What do you say?
I say absolutely. I say 100% yes. And I say, and come with me to Bridgeport.
Wow. That's great. Gary?
I say you got to be tough. It's you know, teaching is not a job. Don't if you think you're just going to go in and everything's going to be happy and, you know, sunshine and rainbows, don't be a teacher. You know, it has a lot of challenges. It's a lot of work. It has great disappointments sometimes and amazing joys.
It's great. I asked you to think about a question that was going to end my interview. You know, and what's the best advice you ever gotten from who?
I think my father told me to never have to look over my shoulder and to live my life so that I never have to worry about worrying.
That's great. Gary?
My mother, always have a plan B.
I like that one. I like that one. Especially today, you know, all the kids want to be NBA stars and football stars.
Yeah.
Right? That's a tough one. I want to thank you for coming. I want to let all the prospective teachers know that if you're interested in teaching at a great public school system, you can contact Bridgeport and you know, contact Lisette Cologne. As a matter of fact, she's the HR recruiter there. And you know, there's a shortage in teachers in the math sciences and special ed and bilingual today. You know, so if you are out there and you're looking to do something that brings you joy, because I gotta say, you know, this interview has enlightened me to the fact that you know, teachers, you guys love what you do.
Yes.
You know, and you know, sometimes you know, I hear the stories and all of this, and you know, I figured, wow, man.
If you don't like it, you won't last.
Yeah.
You don't last.
Yeah.
People who don't like teaching, leave it.
Yeah. I want to thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
And please come back. All right.
will.
Okay.
Juan Castillo with you. This is the Electric Drum. It's been a pleasure. I know you've been inspired. I have. Keep listening, and I will see you next week.